Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're able to join us today for our next edition of the 49er Industry Chat. My name is Mbeya, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start our session today, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will live on our website at csulb.edu/alumni to your viewing pleasure on your own. Just for today's discussion, we encourage you to use our Q&A box located below that helps us monitor all the questions coming through to make sure that our speaker answers all your questions today. And now I would like to introduce Lucia Cos, who graduated in 1975 from the College of Liberal Arts with a degree in Spanish and was recognized as a distinguished alumna in 2005 and now serves on our CSULB Alumni Council. Thank you so much, Lucia, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. I want to say good day because Kimberly, our speaker is, it's 9 o'clock in the evening for her. So Kimberly Marsh is a clinical research professional supporting international collaborations in clinical research and vaccine trials. As a CSULB undergraduate, she began her research career working at the Center for Behavioral Research and Services. Kimberly now lives and works in Tanzania, supporting clinical research operations for the Henry M. Jackson Foundation for the Advancement of Military Medicine in support of the U.S. military HIV research program. With the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, researchers, including Kimberly, who were working on the global challenges about HIV, TB, Ebola, and other infectious diseases, quickly set out to address this new threat. Kimberly holds a BS in cell and molecular biology from Long Beach State, graduated in 2009, where she was a President's Scholar as well as an MPH specializing in infectious diseases from the UC Berkeley School of Public Health. So joining us today from Tanzania to lead our industry chat is Kimberly Marsh.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Lucia. It's really nice to be with everybody.
Go ahead, Kimberly, you're on.
Okay, well, so I'm really looking forward to talking a little bit with students and young alumni. It hasn't been that long since I finished my university degree. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, and something that I wish that I understood when I was first starting in my career, is that it is a winding path. Often it's a circular one where it can come right back to what is planted in your heart early on. So a little bit about me. So I grew up as a California girl in the Bay Area, was always in California. And I remember being so adamant as a high school student that I was going to go to UC San Diego. And it was my mother that found an application form, I think in my backpack, for Cal State Long Beach. And it's funny how some of those key moments in life and those key decisions can really set your path. So I remember visiting the campus and coming for a tour. And even though I had a specific plan for my life and for what I was going to do, as soon as I was on campus, it just felt like where I was supposed to be. And I remember meeting with Dr. Carol Itatani, who I think is a professor emeritus, at that tour, and that day made my decision. I'm gonna go to Cal State Long Beach. I was really privileged to be a part of the President's Scholars Program, which really shaped my college experience. I think that one of the really unique things was in Cal State Long Beach, you have such a huge university. So you have a lot of resources, a lot of breadth of opportunity and diversity, while still having these smaller communities. So I feel like I got so many one-on-one experiences. So I know that that same professor, Dr. Itatani, that was so pivotal in my decision to go to Cal State Long Beach was also pivotal in guiding the initial part of my career, because at the time I thought I was going to be a doctor. There was one point in my life where I thought I was going to be a pediatric oncologist, and I was pre-med, and Dr. Itatani ran a phlebotomy class, which was initially started to train the HIV counselors and research assistants for the Center for Behavioral Research and Services, which was a community-based organization affiliated with the university, and Doctors Reynolds and Fisher ran that out of the psychology department. And so after I finished this phlebotomy course to try to get a job in a hospital and get some experience, because I thought I was pre-med, I got a job with Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Fisher and started working for a research organization, and just fell in love with research and with public health. And that was really kind of a key pivotal moment in shaping my career that I don't know if I would have had if I had ended up at any other university. So I'm very appreciative for my beginnings at Cal State Long Beach and all the unique experiences that I was able to get there. So I ended up deciding that I was going to go on to get a degree in public health, and still thought I was going to do medical school after that. But I thought, I really want to do this. And at the time, I was actually working with Dr. Klieg in a bioinformatics lab, working with genetics and computers. And so it was a really big shift to go out into the community, working with people who had really different lives than my own, coming as a cisgender, middle-class, white woman, and the privilege of having access to people's lives and the generosity of our clients who would share their experiences, whether we were working with people experiencing homelessness, people who were supporting themselves through sex work, working at the Gay and Lesbian Center in downtown Long Beach, or even youth that were experiencing challenges. And I remember just feeling very honored to hear their stories and to have them share with us as we were going through our counseling sessions. At CBRS, I was working as an HIV counselor, and also going through these really intense interview questionnaires asking about all of their sexual behavior and all of their drug use and drug practices. And they were really very open and honest. And it was a really good initial understanding of cultural humility, of the importance of being very culturally sensitive in research, the importance of having those voices in research, not just as study participants, but the people who are the scientists and the researchers, so that you make sure that everything you do is appropriate and ethical. And so I think that really, again, planted some seeds for me. One of the kind of cumulative experiences was just before I graduated. I think the year before I graduated, Cal State Long Beach started doing some short course study abroad programs. And as a science major, it's very difficult to take a whole semester to go study in Europe or something like that, because often your science courses don't transfer. So that was an experience that I thought I was going to miss out on, and was so appreciative that during the winter break before I graduated, there was a 3-week course in international healthcare, and we would be going to Tanzania. And that was my very first trip outside of the US, my very first trip to Africa. And I remember barely getting off the plane and feeling the same way that I did when I stepped foot on the Cal State Long Beach campus, of just knowing that this is where I'm supposed to be. And it was very surprising. About 7 years after that, I ended up making my home in Tanzania. So things really do come full circle. And some of these experiences that you have at university and early in your career can really shape your path. I think not in a way where you have to stress out about, oh, making all the perfect decisions, but I think more of seizing the opportunities, even if they don't seem to directly lead you where you think you want to go. That when you're given these opportunities to have unique experiences, to have experiences that put you outside of your comfort zone, they can really make a big difference and shape where you end up and help you discover what's really important.
Kimberly, the classes that you took at Cal, first of all, were you there for like 4 years or had you transferred in?
I was actually there for 6 years. I took a year off in the middle and then an extra year to graduate after changing majors a couple times and adding a couple minors. So I was there for 6 years in total.
Good, because that's good to know, because some people get kind of disappointed in themselves when things don't go the way they want. But my question was, some of the classes that you took, did they help get you ready for some of the things you would be meeting, out there in terms of some of these very personal interviews? Or have you seen a change in from that time? It's not that long ago, but from that time now to now, in terms of doing more sharing of classes in school on how to prepare for working with these, not just diverse in race, but just about everything, communities?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is I was very intentional early on, even though I was very clear on my goals as far as wanting to work in medicine and science. So obviously I took a lot of science classes, but even early on, I specifically chose to have a communications minor because I knew that I needed something to balance that out. And I knew that that was going to be important to me regardless of what I did. So I remember that, you're taking interpersonal communication, nonverbal communication, you're taking intercultural communication, organizational communication. And I'm surprised that I actually had that wisdom as an 18-year-old kid to know that those classes were probably some of the most valuable. Of course, going into the sciences, you need to have that technical background. And so I'm very appreciative for that foundation technically. But I do think that some of these more liberal arts type classes, those capstones and requirements that you think that you're just getting through them, I think that's really important to try to choose something that actually does interest you and to get that breadth of diversity, because when you're out there in the workplace, you never know what's actually going to come in handy.
Right. I'm glad that you incorporated those into your, very science oriented education, because that's probably something that's lacking in a lot of people that just do the science education. I'm an advocate for all the those classes that you have to, your prerequisite classes. I always tell young people, because I found out myself too, that those will help you even, be the cornerstones of whatever field you're going into. So you're a good example of that. Now, I'd like to know what you did with that year off.
What I did with that year off, I was actually working at CBRS and also at a hospital as a phlebotomist. So and actually that time working at the hospital helped me realize that that wasn't the environment that I wanted to work in. It was great experience. I utilized my phlebotomy skills when I did go into clinical research and in fact trained other phlebotomists at Bridge HIV, where I ended up working after graduate school. So that all came in handy. And now, having some sort of clinical experience helps me relate to the clinicians that I work with and have an understanding of working directly with study participants and patients. But it did help me realize that I did not necessarily want to have a job where I came in and had very routine work where every day was pretty much the same routine, obviously different patients. And I didn't really want to work long-term in a hospital environment. So it was good information and good experience.
Now, one of our listeners is asking, based on what you were talking about before, are there any skills not taught in the college courses that we should be learning or working on in terms of your field?
Yeah, I think, so obviously I purposely chose to make sure that I had a strong foundation in communications, understanding that even if you're in a very technical role, I think sometimes when we're in our course of study, we can underestimate how important some of these soft skills are, regardless. I mean, you can be a practicing clinician, and if you are a doctor or you are a nurse, like, you really need to have a very strong skill set in communication and working with diverse groups and how to communicate effectively and clearly, both with your patients and with the other people that you're working with. Even if you're a bench scientist, you may think that, oh, you know, I'm not a numbers person or I'm not a finance person, I'm gonna go and just be a scientist. Well, you're still gonna have to work with budgets and talk to all of the finance people. Maybe you are a science person because you're like, you know, I'm not really a writer. I don't really want to go down the English or creative writing route. Technical writing is a skill that you definitely need. So you need to be able to have technical writing skills and a really strong command when it comes to writing, because you're going to be possibly writing grants and proposals, writing papers so that you can publish your research. In my case, you know, writing protocol documents, writing the documents that are required for regulatory submissions. So you can go into science and think that you will be somehow insulated from all these other things, but whether you are directly doing them or have to interact with the people that are and kind of speak their language, I think that as much kind of cross-cutting skills that you can have, definitely communication. I think definitely over the course of my education and my career have shifted very much from a cultural competency idea to cultural humility. I would like cultural competency is not necessarily the way to go. Cultural humility gives you a foundation that you can build from, and it's that constant learning and constant journey, and you will use that in any situation, whether you're working with interagency or interorganizational cultural differences, whether it's racial differences, whether it's nationality differences, whether you're living in your country of origin or passport country or living abroad. All of those skills are very cross-cutting. So I would definitely say communication, technical writing, and also persuasive writing. You often will have to make a case for something in the course of your career. Public speaking still terrifies me. I'm very grateful for my speech communication classes and, you know, videotaping yourself and getting some of those skill sets, because no matter what you do, those are going to come in handy.
Kimberly, is that terminology, cultural humility, is that a new term? Because I can see that not just helping you with going to other countries, but also just living in our society where you have so many different cultures, especially you know, with recent events.
Yeah, I'm not sure how new that term is. I know that I was first introduced to it probably after, well, concepts of it within graduate school. I went to UC Berkeley for graduate school, so obviously a very diverse community, a very socially progressive community. But I think that when I first started really learning about that terminology was when I was working for Bridge HIV in San Francisco. So I guess that would have been 2011, 2012, right, when I started about it.
So I did have a question about how did you end up working with the Henry Jackson Foundation?
So this is actually a really cool story. So I had been working for Bridge HIV as their clinical laboratory coordinator, and I really loved doing that type of work in research. By then, I had figured out, I'm not going to go to medical school. Really like doing this clinical research, like working with vaccine research, but I kind of wanted to get involved with everything. Like I was kind of relegated to focusing on the laboratory and the clinic side, but I would listen to and try to learn from our study coordinator there. And I was like, I want to do maybe a job kind of more like that, where I'm a little bit involved with everything, but for an international site. I was like, I still really want to work abroad. Like I never stopped thinking about Africa. I did my internship when I was getting my MPH, where I spent a few months in a refugee settlement in Zambia, working with an NGO there that I came on as their health intern, but was also working on an agricultural loan program and a substitute science teacher at the high school, and really got a lot of experience with that. And I knew that that's really what I wanted to be doing, was international collaborations and supporting capacity building in Africa specifically for me. And I wasn't quite sure how that could happen, because rightly so, there are plenty of qualified researchers now in these other countries, and that's the goal, is to get more educational opportunities, more experience. And so over the last 10 years or so, there's really been a lot of expertise built up locally. And so, and when you're working within the community in which you have grown up and are a part of, you can actually do much more effective work, because you understand the language, you understand the culture, you understand what solutions might actually work for some of the problems that you would experience. And so bringing on an expat worker can have its downsides, and then it certainly does have its benefits, because you have this exchange of ideas and information, and sometimes you can bring in skill sets or experience that aren't there yet locally. So I didn't really see how it was going to be possible for me to do the kind of work that I wanted to do in an international setting, because that type of job usually would be a local position. And so I was just thinking, this job doesn't exist. It's so bizarre what I want to do. I've never seen anybody do this, where it's like, I just want to get a little bit involved in everything, and I just want to support this, and I want to help facilitate this exchange of information and these collaborations. And I was thinking that, as kind of a consolation prize, I'll go and work for a pharmaceutical company as a clinical trial manager and just get to work with the sites. So through email, have this kind of distant connection over the internet with these sites, and maybe be lucky enough to go for site visits, and maybe that would satisfy that longing. And so while I was interviewing at pharmaceutical companies in the Bay Area, I had been updating my LinkedIn profile, and a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, do you want to work in Tanzania? And sent me this job description that was literally my dream job that I had never seen exist anywhere. And the reality is, it didn't until my now boss created it, fought to get the backing and the support of her boss and boss's boss to say, look, this kind of position that typically you would bring an MD, typically you'd bring somebody that's more on like the science, the research side. She's like, that's not what you need. There are clinicians, there are doctors here. She's like, you need somebody more with an MPH, and somebody who can deal with some of the administrative side and some of the operational side, and somebody that can facilitate this communication back and forth. The other thing, they thought for sure that they couldn't get somebody that wanted to live outside of Dar es Salaam, which is like the big metropolitan city here in Tanzania. And that was the thing for me, is I specifically wanted to work in Tanzania, but not live in Dar es Salaam. I wanted to live in a more rural area. And that is exactly where this job was based. It was based in the city of Mbeya, which is, oh gosh, could be anywhere up to like a 16 to 19-hour drive away from Dar es Salaam. And it was exactly what I had been dreaming of and hoping for, and was convinced that it didn't exist because I hadn't seen it before and I didn't know anybody else that did it. And, you know, again, like I just kind of stayed open, you know, followed, like made use of the opportunities that I was given at the time. I gained so much experience working at a clinical trial site in the US, and then was able to bring that experience here to the site here. Now things don't run the same way. Obviously, this is a very different context, but we can share those ideas.
Kimberly, for us that, like myself, that don't know, what is the Henry Jackson Foundation?
So the Henry Jackson Foundation is actually a nonprofit organization that supports military research. So, it's for the advancement of military medicine. So it supports our warfighters at home and abroad in many different ways. I remember at my orientation sitting next to somebody who was working on like sleep research. Because obviously when you have people who are deployed abroad and in a war zone, they are having to operate at optimal levels under very extreme conditions and lack of sleep. And so figuring out some of those things, one aspect of the type of research that they support is the US military HIV research program. Obviously, infectious diseases are a global threat. When we have our service members both at home and abroad, you know, they can be also at risk for these various infections. And historically, that's always been a concern for our warfighters when it comes, I mean, even as far back as yellow fever or influenza. So that's kind of the connection between global health and military and supporting our warfighters, in addition to supporting citizens across the whole world, because we're all connected.
So this foundation works with not just the military or with the military, but also, are you under their umbrella now in Tanzania?
No, actually in Tanzania, we work with an international partner. So the site that I help support is not a military site. It is not a US site. It is an incredible group of Tanzanian researchers that originally started a partnership with researchers in Germany, and started the Mbeya Medical Research Program at the time. And then later USMHRP came in as a partner on the American side. And now it is NIMRI MMRC, so it's a part of the National Tanzanian Healthcare Research Infrastructure, the National Institutes of Medical Research. And they have, I believe, 8 different research centers throughout the country. And the one in Mbeya is one of them that specifically partners both with European sponsors and partners, but specifically I work on all of the US MHRP collaborations and partnerships with them. So it really is a collaborative effort, and it's supporting, again, not just Americans, not just the US military, but we are all connected. So you can't really just support one country, just support one group of individuals. You know, with something like HIV, with something like Ebola, with something like TB, it's really important to be working globally, and that benefits the local communities here as well quite greatly.
So you ended up in Tanzania. You mentioned that you went there first for when you were in college or right after college. And then what was it that attracted you back to Tanzania?
I don't know that I was attracted back. It never left. It was always there. I'm pretty sure my family and friends got real sick of hearing me talk about Africa. And, you know, and at that time, you know, I think a lot of people have an understanding of Africa as this homogenous concept even, and it's not. I mean, I knew once I started getting more, I knew that I wanted to work in East or Central Africa, and I had a general understanding that South Africa as a country is very different, that West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, like that, those are really different. And I felt really connected to both Tanzania and Zambia, where I had made friends through my time there. So it never really left. Like I was always talking about Zambia, I was always talking about Tanzania, and trying to figure out where the skills that I had could fit, because I also didn't want to fall into that trap of thinking that that I had a right to come in and work here and live here without having something tangible to bring, without having a specific skill set that was needed and wanted. So that was really important to me to, utilize the time living in the US to build up skills that could be transferable and that would benefit. And then also, to try to figure out, okay, well, what is my role? Because that's the thing, is these global challenges, they're so big, and you can have a heart for something, but be like, well, but I'm an accountant, or I'm an art major, or, but I think that when you have a heart for a particular cause or like a larger concept, there is a role for you somewhere to bring your unique skill set to that issue. It's just a matter of getting creative or coming across the right opportunities or coming across the right like-minded individual, and really kind of manifesting your own path and understanding that it doesn't necessarily have to look like what you've seen other people do, or what you see out there as kind of the standard. And I think that's something that took me a long time to kind of come to terms with and accept, because for the longest time I was like, this path that I've been on is just strange. I don't know anybody that's had the same path, or feeling like I needed to be more focused. I needed to be a subject matter expert. But there is a role for somebody who has a little bit of experience with phlebotomy and direct patient interaction, and a little bit of experience on the virology side, and a little bit of experience with writing presentations and papers, and a little bit experience with spreadsheets, and a little bit experience with lab. Because I never thought that I would be working so much on budgets and finance and supporting the financial side, because I don't have a finance background. But a lot of the skills that I've developed and the kind of natural things that I've gravitated to, or the natural kind of talents that I might have, you kind of just jump in and say, okay, there's this problem, whether it's the larger problem or a small project or problem that's facing you, and you say, okay, what can I bring to this? What can I bring to the table here? And also, okay, what do I not quite have? Are there skills that I still need to work on and develop and are not too far outside the scope of what I know works for me? So it's an interesting balance.
Yeah. I think you bring up some really good points that I think a lot of us I'm retired now, but I've learned so much along the way in picking up skills. And sometimes you don't have to be the subject matter expert. You have to be the person that can make it happen, and you can't do it with some of this without some of the skills that you mentioned. So I know someone asked a question earlier, and it might fit in here, is what are some of the best, I know it said study habits that you develop through your college years, but I think it could also be some of the skill sets that you learn. How did that all fit in with and what you do with it now?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest skills, certainly transferable to the world that we're in right now. I mean, one, having the ability to collaborate and to work collaboratively. I remember in college, people would always groan about group projects.
My dog's barking at the post.
No problem, no problem.
He hates the
Yeah, I think that instead of bemoaning those opportunities where we're forced to work with each other on a group project, understanding that most people, certainly not everybody in their work, but most of us in our jobs have to work on group projects and we're not getting graded on it. It's essential to our daily work and our daily our business and the bottom line if you're working for a for-profit company. So I think that is one thing to definitely continue to get experience in and to see as an opportunity for learning and growth. And it's not just something that you only have to do when you're in school. So learning how to effectively collaborate, learning how to effectively communicate, and how to both step into leadership and also help other people to be able to step up to leadership as well. Organization, I feel like everything moves so quickly now. We are expected to move so quickly, and especially during this pandemic, you are on Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. So I think that one thing that really serves me well is to stay very organized, and I still feel like, you know, sometimes I'll struggle with it, but definitely using different tools for managing like your tasks and to-do lists. I've used Evernote and OneNote for taking notes on meetings because it's really helpful. Like I'll be taking some notes in a meeting and then somebody will say, oh, like, can you email those notes after? And if you can just export it to a PDF, great. Then you can loop everybody in, everybody's on the same page. So I think definitely like figure out what works for you. I've definitely tried a lot of different tools, and sometimes it just doesn't work for me. And so I think that when you're a student, it's a really good time to figure out what does work for you as far as how to stay organized, how to organize your notes and your thoughts and your ideas, especially so that you can come back and access them later when somebody has a question about something and you're like, oh, okay, I have this here, and can easily pull it up because everything is moving so quickly in today's world. And that's whether you're in profit or nonprofit, you're constantly feeling a time crunch. And so the less time you can spend looking for things or trying to remember things, I think especially as we get older, our memory is not as good. Whereas I feel like I have to write everything down where maybe I would have remembered when I was college age. So I think that those things have served me really well. The other thing that I think I wish that I knew when I was like just starting out in university or in my career is really the importance of self-care, and not understanding that is so key to productivity. Proper sleep, taking time for breaks to go for a walk, like what, I mean, everybody has their thing that they know helps sustain them. Like we are not limitless. And I think for a long time, I felt like I had to be, you know, if you are a very high pressure type of student and you're like, I need to get into the best graduate program and I need to do this and I need to do that. Sometimes you can think that, well, I'm going to accomplish that by just studying nonstop. And who needs sleep? That whole hustle, that rise and grind culture. I think people are starting to realize like that part of making sure that we can be the best people that we can be, bring our best to our jobs, be the most productive, bring the best to our families and our roommates and our partners, which I'm, unfortunately for my partner, still learning that, you know, when you are stressed out and not fed and not sleeping, you're really no good for anybody, and you're gonna burn out really quick. I think that was definitely a contributor to me taking a year off in the middle of school. I think that might have been after organic chemistry. That, you know, we're not limitless, we're human, and that everybody's going through this. You know, when you see everything on Instagram, it seems like everybody has it figured out and has their perfect 5 a.m. ritual and are just slaying it at everything. But the reality is we are all just doing the best that we can and all desperate for sleep and desperate for a vacation. And it's really important to take that time. I love that even Dr. Fauci, who is definitely one of my public health role models, he takes time to go for his power walks. And, you know, this is a man who must be under incredible pressure and have, you know, what he could tell himself, like, this is the most important thing, is this work and this role. And he could, you know, just succumb to the pressure of that. But, you know, he's figured out that the key to having a career and an impact that is decades long and still having such an incredible impact is that you have to take care of yourself.
I think you talked about a couple of things here that I think were really telling is, one is just understanding critical thinking skills. And that's not really something that someone can teach you. You have to figure that one out yourself. There might be some models out there that can help you. The other is this one about work-life balance. And you aren't, you know, and some of us, like myself, have to learn that the hard way. So it sounds like you had to kind of grapple with that too. And I guess that's a good segue into going back to when you were at Cal State Long Beach. Are there any programs or resources in particular that our listeners today that we do have some students online right now, so that you could get some advice you could give to them on some of those resources and programs they should take advantage of?
Yeah, I think one, just kind of more broadly, it might, you know, exactly what program it is will depend on you, but I think finding a community is really important. So I had the President Scholars, so finding some opportunity for community and help it feel like a smaller university. Also some opportunity for fun. I was in the pep band, so that's kind of like fun and community together. Like, you have to have some people that you can have fun with and have some joy with. So I think that was just such a great experience. The other thing is definitely utilizing the services that are there, the things that you're paying for in your tuition. You know, if you are struggling in a class, seek out tutoring. Like, I went to the tutoring center and got tutoring for organic chemistry because it is hard. And it was really hard. I literally would have dreams and nightmares about organic chemistry when I was taking that course. There's no shame or stigma there is stigma, unfortunately, in accessing mental health services. Like, we need to think about mental health services the same as physical health clinics. Like, utilize the health center for both your physical needs and utilize mental health services when you need it, because that is really important, and those resources are there for you. Utilize if there's like career counseling, seek out those opportunities. I feel like one thing I still have to remind myself is don't wait too long to ask for help. I think I still struggle with that, where like I'll be like, why have I been struggling with this for so long? The team that I work with, my team back in the US, you know, sometimes I'll be like, why did I wait so long to say, hey, I'm feeling really slammed? And one of them will be like, I can write a draft of that document if that would help. And I was like, why didn't I think to ask that like a week ago instead of sitting here at my computer, like stressed out? So I think, yeah, seek community and seek whatever services are going to help you, because it's going to save you time and energy and stress in the long run.
Right. I know we're almost at the 15-minute mark, but here was another question that came in, and it was, how has your research evolved? Because you're really, I mean, when I was reading all this, you know, I know you're working in Tanzania, and I'm not sure exactly where the focus is now, but they mentioned, you know, Ebola, HIV, and COVID is another thing that, you know, that got packed on top of that. So how has your research evolved through, you know, just even within this last year?
I mean, I think my research has evolved in the same way that the research community has evolved, in that we're building off of existing structures and existing both technologies and like human power structures. So one of the things, so I've worked in HIV clinical work and these global trials for most of my career. But those same systems in place, the same clinics, the same researchers, the same kind of operational structure for how to do a good clinical trial already exist. And so then when you have, for example, like the Ebola outbreak in West Africa that we had several years ago, and a big push to develop an Ebola vaccine, well, those pharmaceutical companies can reach out to existing clinical research sites and clinical research organizations that have already been doing this with HIV vaccine trials. So, and even some of the same technologies. Janssen and J&J announced, I think at the beginning of last month, that their Ebola vaccine regimen was approved by the European Commission. That same technology that's used has also been used for an HIV vaccine study that is ongoing globally, and for an upcoming COVID-19 vaccine. So these, you develop the tools, and then when you are faced with new challenges, oftentimes you can plug into those same tools. Like, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to set up whole new systems. And that's why I think that the response to COVID-19 has been so quick, because we had these systems in place. And it's been able to really, the HIV vaccine world has really pivoted and taken on a lot of this work, in addition to also still juggling this ongoing HIV vaccine research. And so I think that that's kind of how I ended up involved in COVID-19 research. It was a natural extension for the clinics and for the programs that I'm involved in, to say, okay, like we already know how to do this. It's just a different product. You know, you're gonna have new things. I mean, obviously with HIV vaccine, we're not taking nasal swabs as part of specimens. So we're writing up some new documents and protocols around collecting nasal swabs. But a lot of that expertise, a lot of those systems and structures are already there, which allows us to address things more quickly, because we're not starting from scratch.
So what does that typical day look like for you?
A typical day. I don't think there is a typical day for me.
Is there a typical day?
So right now I'm on 100% telework. So I'm working both from home and from a little space that I've rented because I had construction next door for several months, which was very difficult. I know that for many of us who are working at home during this time can understand the challenges of literally being in the same place and trying to work. Yeah, so my typical day looks a little bit different now than it used to, because I'm not going into the clinic. I'm not a doctor. I'm not needed in the clinic to be treating patients. A lot of my work is done through emails and conference calls and video chats. So every day is some combination of now a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of phone calls and WhatsApp messages with my colleagues here in Tanzania. Pre-pandemic, it would have been like about half, working in the evening for me to have calls with my colleagues back in the US, either on the East Coast or the West Coast. And then about a half a day in the clinic and in the offices to meet with my Tanzanian colleagues. But I mean, today I had finance calls. I'm working on documents for regulatory submissions for new protocols and checking in with colleagues to see how they're doing, because I don't get to see them in person right now. And trying to find quiet time when I need to write. Definitely trying to carve out those time for those focus tasks when you're either writing or working on spreadsheets or having to do a lot of reading, for example, if there's new protocols or something coming out. So every day looks different, and for some people that's really unnerving or really unsettling.
Yeah.
Some people really thrive with routine. I'm one of those people that likes novelty, and I don't mind having every day different, which has made it work for working in this type of job where sometimes, you know, based on other people's schedules across the world, it's not unusual for some days from my work day and all my calls to be over by like 5 p.m. here, and some days to be still having calls at 10 p.m. here. So it suits me to have that flexibility, but it may not be for everybody. And so it's really good to be honest about what kind of work environment you want. But I really appreciate the fact that each day is new, and you wake up and you see, okay, what steps are we going to take to help move these trials forward today? And once you reach the end of what you can do, you come back tomorrow and you do it again.
So Kimberly, you talked about Dr. Fauci and his power walk. What do you do to get some, you know, for you?
For me, so a few things. So I have a lot of animals. I have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and several chickens. So definitely having my animals for some levity and some cuddles. I do a little bit of yoga and meditation, and I notice that when I do those things, I'm a much nicer person to be around and feel much more focused. I'm so fortunate. I live in what I think is the most beautiful place on earth. So if I'm gonna be 100% telework and kind of more isolated, it's a beautiful place. I literally have a mountain in my backyard that I can go climb. The place where I sometimes work out of on my own has a beautiful view of this Rift Valley. And then I try to, my partner and I take weekends away to explore. Right now, you know, we have fewer tourists coming. So we went a few months ago, we went to Kitulo National Park, and literally we're the only people there except for the rangers, and went camping there. So that really restores me, is having a little bit of travel. I'm definitely missing international travel during this period. So we're using that opportunity to explore more of the beautiful home that we have here.
I have another question from one of our listeners. It's a little long, so I'll just try to briefly. Have you ever held any kind of like side jobs that helped you with your communication, or maybe people or mentors that help with you with communication? Because they imagine in a technical field, you often have to break things down in an easy, digestible way for people less technical.
Yeah, honestly, one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, and some of the greatest mentorship that I had from a manager, was while I was in graduate school, I worked at Pete's as a barista. And that was hard. And, you know, talk about learning how to communicate with a lot of people and juggle lots of things. So that was one kind of unusual job that wasn't necessarily related to my field, but I feel like really taught me a lot. But I mean, I've been working since I was a teenager, from summer schools. I was a gymnastics instructor in high school. I think that as far as for my career, you know, getting that experience working at CBRS as an HIV counselor and a research assistant definitely gave me a lot of skills, where now, I mean, especially because I'm not a native Kiswahili speaker, I'm not doing the interviews with the participants, but because I had that experience, it gives me some insight and helps me do my job better in supporting and working with my colleagues who do that direct interaction. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody should have some sort of service-oriented job. It can teach you some of the most, including some humility. But then also seek out opportunities to find things that have some, even if it's not directly what you want to do, if you can have some connection, I feel like you are really lucky and fortunate to be able to find something that has some connection to the field that you're interested in. And it could also be an opportunity, like for me with phlebotomy and working in the hospital, it may just teach you that that's not what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, one other question before we end. I mean, we still have about 5-6 minutes. What's next for you? What have you not done that you want to do?
Career-wise or personally? That's a big
Either
question.
way, both.
So I mean, career-wise, because I'm an expat worker here, you know, I have to apply for work permits, and so I've accepted that sometimes you don't have complete control over it. And so whereas when I was in university, I would have like a 10-year plan. I don't necessarily do that anymore. I'm very appreciative for what I want, for what I'm doing now, and I want to keep doing what I'm doing now. I think that for me, it's just a matter of continuing to get to work with having an impact in my community here, continuing to get to work in a job where I get to both mentor people and also learn from people. I like working in health. I like being able to work on these big global infectious disease issues. So I think for me, it's just being grateful for the position that I have and understanding that, you know, we just take each step at a time, and sometimes you can't have the next 10 years planned out when it comes to career, especially if you work in a field that changes. You know, when you're working in research, you're dependent on grants. So you often can't think more than a grant cycle ahead. Certainly you can dream and hope and plan to some degree, but nothing's guaranteed. Personally, just probably doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, is adapting all of those personal plans to, okay, what are we doing now that the pandemic has changed things? I'm in the middle of planning a wedding for next year, and that looks very different than what it might have looked like pre-pandemic. That's one thing that I'm really looking forward to, is you know, our small Lake Tanganyika Tanzanian wedding, and just getting to see some of these big goals reached, both with COVID-19 and seeing what I think will be multiple successful, safe, and efficacious vaccines in the next few years. We'll be seeing more and more coming out. And then when it comes to an HIV vaccine, like, that's something that's really close to my heart, because that's kind of where I started with my roots at Bridge HIV. And when people ask about the progress of the HIV vaccine, I tell them, like, I feel like I can say with confidence that within the course of my career, I think that we will have a safe and efficacious HIV vaccine. So for me, like, I really look forward to being able to see that and being able to say that I played a part in that.
Well, I think you answered our question about personally what's next. I guess it's that wedding, right?
That's what's next.
Like
and keeping fingers crossed that my parents will be able to fly out.
And do they live here in Long Beach, or?
So I'm actually from South San Francisco, and
That's
my parents still live there in my hometown.
Okay. Well, I hope we get to meet you here on campus at some point in the future.
I do too. I want to come back to go to a volleyball game.
There you go. We'll have to get you tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've asked all the questions, but why don't you give us some last words, and very specifically to the people online here that are students and also young and older alum, in terms of, you know, their careers.
I think the biggest thing is to understand that we are all in this together, that we are connected globally. Everything is so much bigger than what we think, and that nothing exists in a vacuum. So like, all of the work that we're doing in the context of politics, of social issues, of social justice issues, economic issues, and we can't lose sight of that, that everything that we are doing is part of a very complex, integrated global system and world. So I think that some of the most important things that we can do is appreciate that and seek out ways to navigate that complexity and have a lot of grace in that, grace for each other and grace for ourselves. Because in every job and every role that we're playing, we are doing it in a very complex context.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and I'm going to kick the ball back to Noemi. But thank you so much. This was a great talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucia and Kimberly, for a great talk. One last question. If any of our viewers want to connect with you, Kimberly, are you on LinkedIn, and could they befriend you on there?
Yeah.
Yes, I am on LinkedIn, and the best thing to do is to not just do a request, but send a little message so that I know who you are and why you're requesting and how you know of me. Kimberly Marsh is a pretty common name, but hopefully by the affiliation, you should be able to find me.
Yeah. Put down what she does, because otherwise you have to go through like 80 names.
Yeah, there's a lot of Kimberly Marshes. In fact, there's another Kimberly A. Marsh who has a PhD, who also works in HIV research and in a different area of research. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Kimberly and Lucia, for a great chat. Again, this session was recorded, so it will be on our website. Just a reminder to follow us on social media at CSULB Alumni to learn about future chats like this. Thank you so much and enjoy your day.
That was